Right. In this video, we will be talking about motivation, and then we will get into, we'll be talking about motivation in general, and then we will switch to the motivation of hunger. So let's go ahead and begin. So when you think about what motivates you to do anything, typically those sorts of reasons are divided into two categories, internal and external, or what psychologists call intrinsic, internal motivations, or extrinsic. You think about for yourself why you're doing school, why you're taking this class. If it's because you're interested in psychology and you like the topic and you like to figure out how people work, that's more internal, obviously. If you're like, well, I need to get this done with my general education and so I can get my diploma and get a job, that's more external. Now, any one behavior can be motivated by both things simultaneously, but typically, if you look at which sorts of motivations end up leading a person to do things more longer term and for more satisfying reasons, the intrinsic ones usually win out. Sometimes there's an obstacle to motivation, and that is if we learn somewhere along the line that, or we begin to believe basically that we can't do something. This can be called learned helplessness. I will post a video in relation to this. There's a infamous study that was done with dogs, and this is kind of a little picture of what happened here, where they put a dog in a device like this, and you can see in this device on one side of this cage, the dog gets a shock, but on the other side of the device, he doesn't. Basically, what they do is they block off the side where he gets no shock, and he sits in the one side and randomly gets shocked. In this case, basically, the dog learns that it's helpless. They eventually then open up that panel so the dog can get to the other side of the cage where he would avoid a shock. But once they do that, the dog has already learned that he can't escape, even though the circumstances have changed and now he actually can. He stays over there and takes the shocks. This can happen with people too. Obviously, if a person, I've seen people in jobs and in situations where they feel like I'm helpless, there's nothing I can do to change this. But sometimes like life or nature changes circumstances and a person is able to do something. But because they've learned that they're helpless, they won't make any efforts to do something. Another aspect of motivation is academic achievement or just achievement motivation. I have here a little chart I'd like you to think about, even in terms of yourself, for how do you explain or understand like your own success in a class or on a test. And you can see there are internal and external reasons we can explain our performance. So we either say I got an A on that test because of internal things or external things. And some things are stable over time and some other reasons are unstable over time. If you look at these four boxes, if you get an A on my next test and then you say, oh, I did that because I studied really hard, and you make an internal unstable attribution or explanation about that, saying that was due to your effort, that is going to contribute to you working harder for your grades on and on and on. That kind of achievement, that is the sort of explanation a person ought to make. If instead, basically a person, let's say that you don't do well on a test and you blame it on ability, that's a stable internal thing. Then a person is going to give up, say, well, I just don't have the smarts for this. Or they say it's external stable, well, this class is just too hard. Or if they even blame or explain away their performance as just luck, that's not going to contribute to a person working harder to try to do better in a class. So in terms of academic motivation, probably the best to go for is that internal, unstable explanation of it being related to the amount of effort we expend on it. Another aspect of motivation is self-efficacy. And this is a belief in our ability to do something. Usually, we have several sources for this, but commonly, we can look at our own past performance and say, okay, I did something like this before, I can do it again. I don't know how many of you have brothers and sisters, but like if you watch somebody do something, you go like, oh, if they did it, I can do it. That is a source of self-efficacy. We can start to form a belief that I'm capable of it. And then sometimes verbal persuasion alone. We have people on our team. We have a mom or dad or like somebody who's like a coach who's just like, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And that can really instill in us this like belief that we are capable of tasks. So actually I put down here, if you can think about times when your own performance increased or got better because of your own past performance, or because you saw somebody else do something, you thought that you could do it, or that somebody you trusted said you could do it. These are sources of self-efficacy. Another aspect of motivational theory is how bodily aroused we are, physiologically aroused we are. Generally, we want medium level of arousal. That's when you see the best performance. If a person is too unstimulated, bored, just is not energized, your performance on any task is going to be poor. However, if you get too much, if you get too anxious, if you get too wound up, it's hard to focus and concentrate, and it's difficult to do well on anything. So typically in terms, and they call this the Yerkes-Dodson law, it's talked about in your book, that we want for our performance to be best, for our bodily arousal to be somewhere in the middle. This is a theory that I think there's a lot to think about, especially in relation to the past year in dealing with the coronavirus. It's just kind of, and you've probably seen this before, it's kind of a map of how motivations are divided into levels. And basically, Abraham Maslow was a psychologist who said, first rung that people need to have fulfilled in their, and will be motivated to fulfill, are their bodily needs for food, water, sex, sleep, being able to breathe. And if those aren't being met, you're not going to focus on anything else. Once those needs are met, you can move up to the next one. And that is safety, kind of predictability. Am I going to be safe? Can I sleep at night without having to worry that something's going to happen to me? Can I just predict that the lights are going to come on when I flip the switch? Do I have a sense that I'm going to be healthy? These are things that are related to overall safety needs. Once those two bottom levels are fulfilled, we can start moving on up to the third level of motivation, which is about feeling like our friendship group is in place, and our family, and we have ties, and we are socially supported. But as you know, I mean, if those other needs aren't met, if we're not getting enough food or we don't feel secure, you're probably not going to be on your phone texting your friends all the time, because your focus shifts down to the lower levels if those lower level needs get threatened. Once we have those other three, we can move up to the next one. It's like, okay, now I can think about doing well in school. Now I can think about doing well in my job. I can really focus on accomplishing the things in life I'd like to see happen. And then ultimately his theory of motivation focuses on, once all those bottom levels of needs are met, we can focus on kind of the beauty of nature and art, being creative, being spontaneous, being open, appreciating people like in all forms. I mean, it's just, this is a level that Maslow argued would really be focused on once those other needs are met. But I mean, you can probably also think of people who don't have every single one of those other levels met, but they still are quite moral and loving and creative and spontaneous. So to think that it's got to be completely fulfilled, no. But generally, as a way of considering how we're motivated, this is a pretty good model for thinking about how we're probably going to spend most of our time. I mean, I use the coronavirus as an example. I mean, if suddenly all the predictability goes away, I mean, we focus on getting food and being okay, being safe. Also, you can think about it like when Costa Rica had the hurricane not long ago, that basically, people were going from doing their jobs to suddenly like, I have to be able to find a dry and safe place to sleep. The shifts can be dramatic in catastrophes. Okay, one last general idea is the idea of homeostasis. I think of this as like your body's thermostat. If you have a thermostat at home and basically you set it on the temperature you want in your house, if it starts to get too hot, the air conditioner is going to kick on and bring it back down to the base level. If it starts to get too cold, the heater is going to kick on and it's going to return back to normal. Homeostasis is about that. We want to maintain a condition of balance. And if we start to get out of that balance, it will create drives in us, like for hunger and thirst and things like that. Speaking of hunger, that's the next thing I want to talk about. When it comes to one's body weight, basically it's a combination of the genes we inherit and kind of what we learn from our environment, our learning history. Your metabolism is how many calories you burn at one time. Excuse me, I have to check the amount of time that has passed. Okay, there we go. This video might be a little bit longer than the others. Another question that comes along is like, why is it difficult to lose weight? You may remember the rats I showed in the chapter on the brain. And we know the hypothalamus, if you cut up part of it, a rat will not stop eating if food is available. Another one, if you cut up another part of the hypothalamus, a rat can starve to death, but their part of the hypothalamus has been ruined and they won't start eating even if food is available. Another part of hunger motivation is what's called set point theory. And that is, we have genetically pre-programmed in us an ideal body weight. And so the problem with that is if we start to restrict food, that our metabolism slows down. Or if we start to exercise a lot, our metabolism speeds up. The research on this is mixed, but I'd like you to be familiar with it as a common idea discussed in the research on motivation of hunger. Some of the things that make us start eating, just the clock. I mean, it's like, oh, it's noon, it's time to eat lunch. But other things physically, when our stomach's empty, we get low blood sugar. Also, when our stomach's empty, we release a hormone called ghrelin. And so it's like growling, ghrelin. That's when it basically you will start to eat because your body's giving you signals and cues. What makes us stop eating? We have some nerves. One is about our stomach being stretched, and it's like, oh, stop. Another nerve in our stomach conveys information about the kind of nutrients we have available in our stomach. And so it's like, okay, I've got these things here. It's okay to stop. Also, when your stomach stretches, you release a hormone called leptin, which basically tells the hypothalamus to stop eating. So these are some of the common eating disorders that you see. Anorexia, you probably heard of many of these. It's just restriction of eating related to disordered body image. And unfortunately, I would say body image problems is one of the most common things I work with in therapy and see among friends and see among family. The number of people who have this distorted image of what they look like and then the motivation they have to try to alter that is just so widespread. Bulimia is a disorder related to eating a whole lot at one time and then purging in some way, throwing up, taking laxatives. Sometimes it's just exercising to an extreme to burn off all the calories. Also, there's binge eating disorder. And that is basically just eating a lot, way more than one anticipated, and feeling a lot of distress about it. And I just talked about body image. I mean, that there is an actual disorder related to having extreme distortion of one's own body image. That is the rest of the material that we had on general motivational concepts and the motivation for eating.